on one hand, it is said we need lower interest rates. However, yesterday there was also news that the CEO of BlackRock mentioned we could potentially get higher interest rates. If that happens, we would of course fall flat here. I think this is intentional, of course, once again, market manipulation. And today we are talking about a few important things, how and what is actually happening in the background right now, and why it's not actually so bad how it's happening. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like and a comment today. In these tough times, I am even more reliant on your support. And definitely check out the link to BitUnix, a great exchange for trading, but also for buying in the crypto spot. You get a deposit bonus there. This is valid until the 20th. April, if you deposit money, you get a bonus. You deposit $1,000 and get $200. As a future bonus, definitely check it out and make sure to participate here. A few days have already passed again, and I think today we can look at the whole thing from a different perspective again. This Black Monday that we have just seen reminds one quite starkly of the Corona crash in terms of numbers and data. And maybe that's exactly what Donald Trump wants. Because take a look at this. During Corona, we had 4 weeks of a severe drop, a 35% fall in the S&P 500. That was really not nice. It was damn hard, but it was short and sharp. And after that, you saw what happened. We had a huge upward trend. Because down here, it was slowly announced that the Fed would inject more money, pumping money into the markets. And with that, they saved the economy during Corona back then. And we had another huge run here. We almost doubled again in the S&P 500 as a result. So it's crazy what is happening here. And we would rather see such a short-term reaction followed by a reasonable upward trend than what we saw here under Joe Biden. Here, we saw that we were just stagnating for months. Not much really happened here. For months, we simply had a stronger correction here. Or rather, this correction lasted for an entire year. And that's why I tell you, we would rather see short-term pain for long-term success than continuously falling over several years. So better this short pain, everything else is really much less enjoyable. The Fed forecasts a negative growth of -4% for the next quarter. That would of course bring us into a recession. Additionally, we also see that unemployment in the USA continues to rise. Accordingly, we are currently pricing in a recession. All of this is of course further fueled by the tariffs. This looks dangerous, but we also had a small recession during the Corona crash. There, we also had a sort of small recession. And I think Trump wants to handle it again in such a way that we see a short-term mini recession for long-term success. You have to consider that if we are really in a recession, the markets won't react much more negatively, because everything is already priced in. Investors are currently extremely uncertain about the entire financial markets. They are even more afraid now than during the Corona crash. And I mean, that says it all. Historically speaking, this will be a good time to buy cryptos and stocks again. Because when we are so deep in fear, in the long term, it has always been a good time to accumulate. We should look at the whole situation rationally and not emotionally. Even in the crypto fear and greed index, we are back at the lowest level. Fallen since the FTX crash. And it's crazy how deeply we are now stuck in fear. I didn't think we would fall into fear deeper than during the FTX crash in a bull run. And I have to remind you, again, at this point, we have never slipped into a bear market from fear. After fear, there was always a rise to better times. Here is also a blueprint of how the USA is playing the whole situation. We had a strong dollar, high tariffs, and debt costs. Accordingly, the USA had to intervene. China was under pressure, mainly because of this very, very strong dollar. China had export problems, capital outflows, deflation, and a real estate crisis. All of this is what we have seen in China over the past few years. China's economy was really not doing so well. China needs to stimulate, needed loans, and has started again with printing money and additionally launched fiscal programs. As a result, we are slowly seeing a proper expansion of money supply from China again, which is very good for our risk-on assets in the future, for Bitcoin, stocks, and so on. That's the course of things. And from here, we then see the next rally, because we have cheap loans and an expansion of money supply again. We have seen this example in recent years. Slowly, however, the USA is pursuing a different policy and is gradually weakening the dollar because the goal has slowly been achieved. China has taken on more loans. China is already starting with printing money and so on to strengthen the economy here. And now the USA is slowly changing its course. The USA is gradually weakening the dollar. And that's exactly what they want. The weaker the dollar is, the better it is to export with the US dollar. And so on. Exactly what the dollar is doing right now, we also saw when Donald Trump first took office. In the short term, the dollar became strong, but then it became very weak. Crypto markets, stocks, and so on. As a result, they escalated very, very strongly because the weaker the dollar is, the better it is for the markets. And it's currently unfolding just like in 2017, when Trump was already president. In the short term, we've even seen that government bond yields have risen again. This means that people have already started to slowly withdraw money from there and are gradually returning into the crypto markets and stocks. This is essentially what we've already seen in recent days. Slowly, confidence is coming back a bit. It doesn't mean it can't go deeper. But as I said, in the long term, this is exactly what's better right now. Short-term pain for long-term success. That's what Trump has often announced. And it looks the same with the S&P 500 right now. Take a look at it. We definitely had a crash for a short time, but in the long term, this will be historically unrecognizable, and better a short crash than stagnating permanently over the years. This crash currently offers incredible opportunities. One should definitely be aware of that. I mean, we are still seeing it right now. Negotiations are even slowly starting to ensure there are no tariffs between Europe and the USA. It would be even better, then one could trade even more freely. Export, import. It would definitely be good if this were implemented worldwide. But whatever, negotiations are underway, and it is completely logical that the USA cannot maintain these tariffs permanently. These are the worst tariffs they have had in over 100 years. It will not be possible to maintain this for months on end. I mean, an iPhone is supposed to cost $3,500 or something like that now. No one will spend that much on it. And it would be much worse for America if we then start getting some Chinese phones or something like that. Accordingly, this is just a bit of scaremongering in the short term. But the implementation will look a bit different, and the USA will quickly backtrack in the coming weeks. Short-term panic for long-term success. Remember that, friends. The game that Trump is playing, he's not playing it for the first time. He knows what he's doing, and he knows very well that in the long run, it's better, so don't worry about it in this regard. It may not look so good in the short term, but in the long run, nothing has changed. While the big players are currently buying, we see that the retail sells. Big whales buy, retail sells. You know exactly what that means. The bull run is not over. The whales, the smart money, isn't buying so aggressively for no reason. They know what they're doing, and they know very well that this cycle is not yet over. We've already seen some nice rallies, but it's not over yet. We will still have really good times here. Retail is scared, but the people who really know more are continuing to accumulate aggressively. That's why zoom out a bit, look at the whole thing long term. I think in 3-4 months, this will have just been a normal correction. And then we will already be much higher with the prices. I expect that by the end of the year, we will have another really nice rally, where we will probably then see the Bitcoin season and the Bitcoin top, time and data at least partially match up. I hope you definitely enjoyed this video. Leave a like and comment, and see you next time, friends.